Demolition crew comes Monday, Uncle Howard announced at the family business meeting, pointing at the warehouse blueprint like a general ordering a strike. Your little storage unit is an eyesore, Vivian. Rusted siding, no visible activity, customers complaining about the appearance. Family voted, we need that space for parking to support the real businesses. My cousins nodded along, already mentally paving over what they assumed was my failed attempt at entrepreneurship, a building I'd inherited from my grandmother that had sat empty for 3 years. But why did I smile instead of protest, and why did the city inspector who arrived for pre-demolition clearance immediately stop the process with a phone call that made Uncle Howard's face go pale? Stop everything. This isn't storage. The inspector's voice carried through the warehouse door he'd just opened. She's running a data center for major tech companies. The equipment I'm seeing here, the climate control, the security systems, the server infrastructure, this is professional grade. He turned to look at us, his expression a mixture of confusion and alarm. The contracts I'm seeing here are worth. Who ordered this demolition? Uncle Howard stepped forward. I have authority over the family business complex. That building appears to be independently owned and operating as a commercial data center. You can't demolish someone's operating business because you want parking spaces. The inspector closed his notebook. I'm flagging this for legal review. Nobody touches this structure until property rights are clarified. My uncle's confident expression crumbled. And I finally spoke. The property rights are perfectly clear. Grandmother left that warehouse to me specifically, separate from the family trust. I've been operating it independently for 3 years. And the contracts inside are worth approximately $4.2 million annually. The Whitmore family business complex had been a source of tension since grandmother's death. The complex covered half a city block, a collection of commercial properties that had been accumulated over 3 generations. There was Howard's insurance agency, cousin Marcus's accounting firm, cousin Patricia's real estate office, and various rental spaces that generated income for the family trust. And there was the warehouse. The eyesore at the far corner of the property that had been sitting empty since I'd inherited it. Or so they believed. Grandmother had left the warehouse to me specifically because she'd known what I would do with it. I'd been a family disappointment for years. While my cousins pursued respectable professional careers, I'd studied computer science. And disappeared into what the family called tech stuff, a dismissive term for work they didn't understand and didn't respect. When are you going to get a real job? Uncle Howard had asked at every family gathering. What exactly do you do with computers? Aunt Patricia had inquired, clearly expecting nothing impressive. It's nice that you have hobbies, dear, my mother, Howard's sister, had said with the particular condescension reserved for children who hadn't met expectations. I'd stopped explaining years ago. They didn't want to understand. They wanted to dismiss. Grandmother had been different. She'd asked questions, listened to answers, and recognized something my parents and relatives couldn't see. I was building something valuable, just not in a way they could measure. The warehouse transformation had taken 18 months. I'd gutted the interior, installed industrial climate control, upgraded the electrical systems, and built out server infrastructure that could support enterprise-level computing needs. The exterior remained unchanged, deliberately. The rusty siding, the minimal signage, the apparent abandonment, all of it was intentional. Data centers are targets for theft and vandalism. The best security is invisibility. My clients didn't care about appearances. They cared about uptime, security, and reliability. My facility offered all 3 at rates competitive with major providers, with the added benefit of personalized service that corporate data centers couldn't match. The eyesore my family wanted to demolish was hosting data for 12 companies, including 3 major tech firms that had found my facility through word-of-mouth recommendations. For $0.2 million in annual contracts. From a building my uncle thought was empty. The family meeting that followed the inspector's visit was explosive. You've been operating a business in the complex without telling anyone? Uncle Howard's face was red with something between anger and embarrassment. I've been operating a business on my property. The property grandmother left to me specifically, separate from the family trust. We had no idea, you didn't ask. You assumed I was failing because that's what you expected from me. You scheduled demolition without consulting me because you didn't think I mattered enough to consult. The building looked abandoned, the building looked exactly how I wanted it to look. Invisible. Uninteresting. Secure. I pulled out documentation I'd prepared for exactly this moment. Here's the deed showing independent ownership. Here's my business license. Here are the insurance policies. Here are the contracts currently in force. The family passed the papers around in silence. For $0.2 million? Cousin Marcus, the accountant, looked genuinely stunned. You're generating $4.2 million from that warehouse? Revenue, not profit. But yes. The data center industry is lucrative if you know what you're doing. Why didn't you tell us? Why would I? You made clear years ago that my tech stuff wasn't a real career. You dismissed every attempt I made to explain my work. You literally scheduled my building for demolition without asking if it was occupied. I let that sink in. You didn't want to know what I was doing. You wanted to believe I was failing. The attempted demolition had legal consequences. Even though no damage had been done, the family's attempt to destroy my property without permission raised serious concerns. I consulted with an attorney who specialized in property disputes. They scheduled demolition of a building they didn't own, containing equipment worth millions, hosting data protected by federal privacy regulations. She shook her head. If that crew had actually started work, you'd be looking at massive liability, contract breaches, and potentially criminal charges for destroying protected data. They didn't know what was inside. Ignorance isn't a defense for destroying property you don't own. They should have verified ownership and contents before scheduling demolition. She paused. Do you want to pursue legal action? Not yet. I want to see how they respond first. Uncle Howard's response was predictable, damage control disguised as reconciliation. We obviously made a mistake, he said during a follow-up family meeting. We should have communicated better. But Vivian, you have to understand, you've been so secretive about your work. How are we supposed to know? You weren't supposed to know. That was the point. My business is separate from the family business complex. My property is separate from the family trust. I don't owe you transparency about operations that have nothing to do with you. But we're family. Family who scheduled demolition of my building without asking permission. Family who voted to destroy my property for parking spaces. Family who assumed I was a failure without ever actually checking. I kept my voice level. That's the family relationship you've established. Don't expect me to suddenly share financial details because you finally realize I'm successful. The investigation into property boundaries revealed additional complications. When grandmother had left me the warehouse, she'd also left me the land it sat on, land that included a strip currently being used as access to other family properties. The family had assumed this access was part of the trust holdings. It wasn't. It was mine. You're saying that driveway leading to the parking lot is actually her property? Uncle Howard's attorney looked increasingly uncomfortable during the property review meeting. According to the survey, yes. The access road crosses her parcel. You've been using it without an easement agreement. We've used that road for 30 years. Which might establish prescriptive easement rights or might not. It depends on whether the use was permissive or adverse. My attorney smiled slightly. Either way, it clarifies that this property is entirely independent from the family trust. Ms. Whitmore has been operating her business on her land, using her building, without any obligation to inform the trust administrators. Uncle Howard looked at me with new eyes. Not affection, he wasn't capable of that kind of shift. But respect, perhaps. Or at least wariness. What do you want, Vivian? I want acknowledgement that my property is mine. I want a formal easement agreement for the access road, at fair market rates. And I want an apology for attempting to demolish my business without consultation. An apology? You tried to destroy $4.2 million in contracts and equipment worth considerably more. You did it because you assumed I was worthless. Yes, I want an apology. The family's attitude shift was immediate and transparent. Suddenly, I was invited to meetings I'd been excluded from for years. Suddenly, my opinions on business matters were solicited. Suddenly, cousins who'd barely acknowledged my existence wanted to catch up and reconnect. The attention was as insulting as the previous dismissal. You didn't value me when you thought I was failing, I told Marcus during one of his transparent networking attempts. You don't get to value me now just because you know I'm succeeding. That's not fair. We didn't know, you didn't ask. You assumed. And then you tried to demolish my building. I shook my head. The relationship you're trying to build now should have existed all along. It shouldn't require $4.2 million to make me worth talking to. The data center continued to grow. Word of the family drama had spread through my professional network. These things always did, and the story had generated unexpected publicity. A local business journal ran a profile, Hidden Tech Success, the data center nobody knew about. The coverage attracted new clients. Within 6 months of the near demolition, my contracts had grown to $6.1 million annually. I was expanding into a second facility, this one outside the family complex entirely. The eyesore that Howard had wanted to demolish was becoming the most valuable property in the Whitmore holdings. The easement negotiations revealed the depth of family dysfunction. Uncle Howard tried to claim the access road through adverse possession, arguing that decades of use established ownership rights. His attorneys discovered that grandmother had explicitly granted permission for that use in documents that precluded adverse possession claims. She'd known, even then, that her family might try to claim what wasn't theirs. Your grandmother was remarkably thorough, my attorney observed during one review session. She structured your inheritance to be bulletproof against family challenges. She knew them better than I did. She knew what they'd do. She also left you a letter. Did you know that? I didn't. The letter had been held by the estate attorney, with instructions to deliver it only if the family causes Vivian trouble about the warehouse. Grandmother's letter was dated 3 years before her death. My dear Vivian, if you're reading this, my son and his children have done something foolish regarding your inheritance. I'm not surprised. They've always underestimated you because you're different from them, quieter, more technical, less interested in the performances they consider success. I left you that warehouse because I knew you'd do something remarkable with it. I structured the inheritance to protect you from exactly the kind of interference they've apparently attempted. Don't let them diminish what you've built. Don't let them claim credit for success they tried to prevent. And don't feel obligated to share your achievements with people who only value you when you've proven value to them. You were always my favorite, though I couldn't say so. You reminded me of myself at your age, underestimated by family, building something they couldn't understand. Whatever you've created in that warehouse, I'm proud of you. Whatever they've tried to do, don't let them win. With all my love, Grandmother. I read the letter 3 times before I could speak. She'd known. She'd prepared. She'd protected me from beyond the grave, anticipating exactly the scenario that had unfolded. The family meeting where I presented the letter was brief. Grandmother left this, to be delivered if you interfered with my inheritance. She anticipated your behavior. She planned for it. I let them read her words. She knew you'd underestimate me. She knew you'd try to take what wasn't yours. She was right about everything. Uncle Howard handed the letter back without comment. Cousin Patricia wiped tears that might have been genuine. She never said any of this to us. She didn't have to. She showed you through her actions, through how she structured the estate, through what she protected and what she left vulnerable. You just didn't pay attention because you assumed you knew everything. The formal easement agreement was signed 3 months later. The family would pay market rate fees for access road usage, $24,000 annually. Not a fortune, but a recognition of property rights they'd tried to ignore. More importantly, the agreement established clear boundaries. My property was mine. My business was mine. The family trust had no claim to anything I'd built. This seems adversarial, Uncle Howard commented while signing the documents. It became adversarial when you scheduled demolition of my building without permission. I'm just documenting the boundaries you tried to violate. We're still family. We're still related. Whether we're family depends on how you behave going forward. So far, the track record isn't encouraging. The server farm expanded twice more over the following 3 years. I built a second facility outside the family complex, then a third in a neighboring city. The business that had started in Grandmother's warehouse grew into a regional data center network serving clients across multiple states. Annual revenue reached $18 million. I employed 47 people. The tech stuff my family had dismissed was now one of the most successful businesses any Whitmore had ever built. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Uncle Howard's insurance agency closed 2 years after the warehouse incident. Not because of anything I did, the industry was changing, and Howard hadn't adapted. He'd been too busy managing family politics to notice that his business model was becoming obsolete. He asked me for a loan during one of our increasingly rare conversations. I'm having cash flow problems. Just a bridge until I can restructure. What collateral are you offering? We're family, Vivian. I shouldn't need collateral. You tried to demolish my building for parking spaces. You voted to destroy my business because you thought it was an eyesore. You assumed I was failing and never bothered to check. I shook my head. Family is what you do, not what you are. You haven't done family with me. I'm sorry about that. Really. We made a mistake. You're sorry now that you need something. That's not remorse, that's positioning. He didn't get the loan. His business closed 6 months later. The irony of the parking spaces he'd wanted, now unnecessary, wasn't lost on anyone. The family dynamics stabilized eventually. Not into warmth or reconciliation, but into a functional distance. They'd learned that I wasn't someone to dismiss. I'd learned that their approval wasn't something I needed. Marcus's accounting firm handles some of my business now. He'd proven competent, and keeping certain work in the family made sense. Patricia's real estate company managed properties for my expanding operations. We'd found ways to work together without pretending the past hadn't happened. The warehouse, the original eyesore, still operates. The exterior remains deliberately unimpressive. The interior hums with servers handling data for dozens of clients. I've thought about renovating the exterior, making it match the professional interior. But something about maintaining the contrast feels right. The building that they dismissed, that they tried to destroy, that they assumed was worthless, it became worth more than anything else in the complex. The appearance was deceiving. That was always the point. Grandmother's photograph hangs in my office. Not the formal portrait that appears in family materials, but a candid shot from my childhood, her laughing at something I'd said, her eyes bright with the intelligence that her children had never quite inherited. She's running a data center for major tech companies. The inspector's words echo sometimes when I look at that photograph. The moment the truth emerged. The moment assumptions collapsed. Grandmother had known. She'd prepared. She'd given me the tools to build something remarkable and the protection to keep it safe from family who couldn't see my value. The demolition crew never came. The parking lot was never built. The eyesore became an empire. And the family who voted to destroy my building learned that the quiet one in the corner might be building something they couldn't imagine. They scheduled demolition for Monday because my warehouse was an eyesore. They wanted parking spaces for their real businesses. They assumed my building was empty because they assumed I was a failure. The city inspector found servers worth millions, contracts worth $4.2 million annually, and a data center more valuable than everything else in the family complex combined. The eyesore they wanted to demolish was generating more revenue than all their real businesses together. Grandmother knew they'd try this. She prepared my inheritance to survive exactly their kind of interference. The building still stands, still looks abandoned, still hums with equipment they couldn't imagine. The parking lot was never built. Some eyesores are worth keeping.